What's going on, everybody? Danny Gutierrez here. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Total Fight Mike. This will be a shorter episode, even though there has been a lot going on in the combat sport world. Last weekend we had Till versus Whitaker. Mike Tyson just announced that he was going to be coming back against Roy Jones Jr. That will be an exhibition bout, and tomorrow, this coming weekend, we have a UFC fight night between Derek Brunson and Edmund Shabazian, who's actually a protege, of Ronda Rousey. So we're gonna get right into it here. So first of all, last weekend's fight with Robert Whitaker and Darren Till. Listen, that was a very close fight. It was a phenomenal fight. I personally scored that fight a draw. When each fighter scores a knockdown, especially when Darren Till knocked down Whitaker with an elbow, and then in the first round and then in the second round, Darren Till came back and was kind of rallying back and pushing forward, and then Robert Whitaker caught him coming in. It was strictly southpaw versus orthodox. A lot of guys were trying to work the kicks from the outside and trying to utilize fake and feints to try and get each other to open up. It was a very high-level kickboxing chess match, not checkers. It was a closely contested fight from both guys. I actually felt that both guys won that night. I personally scored that fight a draw, but what are you going to do? Robert Whitaker wins by unanimous decision. I thought it was weird that they scored it unanimously for Robert Whitaker, but I'm not a judge. And the judging in Abu Dhabi was a little bit funky too, but what are you going to do? There was a very controversial stoppage between Francisco Trinaldo and who his opponent was. His name escapes me, but it was a fight that was being refereed by Herb Dean, and you hear outside of the cage Dan Hardy, one of the commentators alongside Paul Felder, scream, "Stop the fight!" And Herb Dean reluctantly stopped the fight, and they had some words after the bout. This is a very difficult situation because, as I'm sure as a former combative athlete, Dan Hardy was very worried about the person who had just gotten flattened out, it seemed, who was just severely hurt by a punch. The thing is that when you run into a situation like that, you can't be screaming at the officiary to stop the fight, because that's going to make them think that it's a doctor or somebody from the commission, somebody who's higher up than they are, and somebody who's definitely higher up than you are, if you are a commentator per se. But yeah, that was a weird situation. I hope cooler heads heal in the end, but that was a weird one. That was a very weird situation, unfortunately. But hopefully, all parties involved came out clean. How about Mike Tyson coming back? He retired about 2005. See, I was born in '92, so my earliest memories maybe when I was 4 years old, and I remember hearing about Mike Tyson being incarcerated and coming back. I remember, Evander Holyfield. I remember, Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe. It was kind of my era of boxing. And then, Roy Jones Jr., Antonio Tarver, Bernard Hopkins, Oscar De La Hoya. Kind of that, Zab Judah, Miguel Cotto, mid to late 90s to early 2000s to onward. And, I remember hearing about Roy Jones Jr. losing to Antonio Tarver, and everybody thinking that was the most devastating upset in all of combat sports. I was paying more attention to MMA and kickboxing at the time personally, but with Tyson retiring in 2005 and with Roy Jones Jr. retiring in 2018, you'd have to think that Mike Tyson's aged a little bit better than a Roy Jones Jr. That being said, Roy Jones Jr. was very active, but you're seeing a lot of the pad work and a lot of the workouts that you see surfacing on the internet with Mike Tyson are from Master Rafael Cordeiro, who comes from the shoot to box style of Vale Tudo or NHB MMA in Brazil. So he's trained with guys like Vanderlei Silva, Anderson Silva. He's trained the Shogun Hua and his brother Ninja Hua, Morilla Hua. He got Fabricio Verduma title at King's MMA, as well as Rafael Dos Anjos. So he trains Calvin Gastelum. He trained Jake Ellenberger when he was competing. So just to give you a sense of the resume of Master Rafael Cordero and who Mike Tyson has been working with, I'm pretty sure that Chris Eubanks Jr. is actually working with Roy Jones Jr. at his fight camp somewhere in Pensacola, Florida. I'm not too familiar with that part of the world and what goes on there, except that he's going to do his best to try and get ready for Mike Tyson. But it'll be a pretty interesting fight. There's some information surfacing that this bout's going to be an exhibition bout, that they're not going to be looking for the knockout, that it's only going to be 8 rounds. They're not going to be looking to kill each other. They're not. It's a lot of the promotional talk is making everything seem like this is a fight that we do not want. But the price on it, which is $49.99, says otherwise. So every hardcore is going to buy it. Every casual is going to buy it. Everybody who's ever heard of Mike Tyson or Roy Jones Jr. is going to buy it. It'll be a pretty interesting matchup. I believe the date has been announced as September 12th. So yeah, Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson, ladies and gentlemen, in 2020. It's probably the only interesting news coming out of 2020. Hindsight is 2020 after all, I guess. Excuse me, guys. Now moving on, the main event for UFC at ESPN is Edmund Shabazian versus newcomer Edmund Shabazian taking on the veteran and Derek Brunson. This is a pretty interesting bout. Edmund Tarverdyan and Ronda Rousey speak very highly of Edmund Shabazian, and you saw his talents unfold when he fought Brad Tavares, Ultimate Fighter alum that was coached by Chuck Liddell, I believe. And longtime UFC middleweight. He's a longtime top 15 UFC middleweight. He's fought Israel Adesanya. He's fought Derek Brunson. He's fought Robert Whittaker. He's fought the cream of the crop. But Brad Tavares is unfortunately one of those guys that the UFC will match up against somebody who they think is going to become that next big star, and usually they do. Edmund Shabazian took care of Brad Tavares as if he was a veteran of the sport. And, you hear the rumors of him training since he was 15 years old alongside the likes of Ronda Rousey, Travis Brown. Jake Ellenberger flopped back and forth. He's trying to end his career when he was competing. He was trying to find the right coach to get him the right formula at the time. But that being said, Edmund Shabazian is a pretty interesting fighter. He doesn't fight like he's green. He doesn't fight with reckless abandonment. And you see a lot of undefeated guys who are very fresh, who are very green, who are very, I won't say inexperienced, but who are trying to gain experience. You see them take a lot of risks, and you see them take some very heavy chances, or you see them take none or very, very little. But Edmund Shabazian is in that sweet spot where he fights like a veteran. He's composed, he's cool, he's calm, he's collected. We haven't even seen all of his skills. The only thing I personally know about him is that he's got very accurate hands. And everything else that I just named to you about him, or that I just listed about him. But Derek Brunson's fought everybody. Anderson Silva, Jacare Souza twice, Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, Ian Heinisch. He's fought a whole bunch of guys. Derek Brunson has. Uriah Hall, excuse me. But listen, it's been the job, and you can look at it. You could see the resume of Derek Brunson. You could look at his record, and you can tell this by looking at his record, especially if you know MMA. He's meant to come in there and ruin the party of everybody who's coming up. Unless you're Israel Adesanya or unless you're a veteran who has his number like Jacare Souza. Usually, more often than not, Derek Brunson's role in these types of main events is to, and this is a 3-round main event, mind you, because originally the main event was supposed to be Irene Aldana on Holly Holm, I believe. But with the switch up, it's going to be a 3-round main event. It has been a while since I believe Adesanya and Anderson Silva was the last 3-round main event that we had, and that was pay-per-view, and it was worth it. But this will be a 3-rounder. This will be the main event. This will be at middleweight. It's going to be a very interesting fight. It's very contrast in styles too, because you have Derek Brunson, who's a wrestler, but he comes forward with reckless abandonment, and that tends to work out for him very well. But in his last fight, you saw him a little bit more calculated. But you have this up-and-comer who's already seemingly cool and calculated. When it comes to the pressure of Derek Brunson, we'll see if it makes a diamond out of Edmund Shabazian or if he crushes under the pressure. So that is this episode of the Total Fight Mike. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Before I go, unfortunately for the year of 2020, there was no Total Fight Challenge event, but I was told that Joe Goitia had booked the Cicero Stadium in Cicero, Illinois in the month of February of the year of 2021. So we're going to see. Hopefully we'll have something scheduled. Hopefully we'll be cage side safely, presumably, hopefully. Yeah, another thing is too, locally speaking, it's going to be a little bit difficult for local mixed martial arts promotions to keep their doors open, specifically because of the fact that with people losing their jobs, not everybody's going to be able to pay for going to the gym. Amateur local guys are looking to make themselves established mixed martial arts fighters are finding it difficult with the pandemic and everything going on with this year. So unfortunately, you hear stories of a lot of places, a lot of fighters not being able to train properly because of the restrictions that their gyms have unfortunately had to implement on them, and simply some gyms are closing because their tenants aren't able to pay. So I mean, thankfully, Joe Goitia is trying to get the ball rolling a little bit for local mixed martial arts, because of course the UFC is still going. Bellator just got their stuff going. You see Eddie Hearn with Fight Camp. He's got his stuff going in his own house, in his own backyard, literally. Top Rank's been having their stuff going, but their ratings haven't been the best, but they're going. So combat sports is trying to get a foothold on the year of 2020 with everything going on with COVID-19 and the economy not being the best. But hopefully everything runs smoothly as this year goes on. So thank you guys again so much for joining me on this episode of the Total Fight Mike. Leave a like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much to my editor, Pat Lesnicki. Hopefully your pinky's doing better. I will see you guys in the possible sequel. Bye, everybody.